Hello, you're watching the Daily Climate Show on Sky News. On today's programme, the country's falling behind in the race against climate. We speak to the COP26 President taking the fight to Turkey. Concerns drought could be the next global pandemic. And the UK and Europe join the race for gigafactories building car batteries. Hello and welcome to the UK's only daily climate news show, where we track the changes that are happening to our world right now and we meet those coming up with the solutions. And climate change is a global fight with real worldwide consequences. The role of COP26 in Glasgow later this year is to encourage ambitious government policies and, in its words, accelerate action. Its President Alok Sharma has travelled to Turkey to strengthen support ahead of the climate conference. Now, greenhouse gas emissions in Turkey rose by 134% between 1990 and 2017, and they're expected to go up again by between 40 and 70% by 2030. That's compared to today's levels. Well, Turkey is taking action on climate. In the Paris Agreement, it states it's bringing down carbon emissions to help in the attempt to limit global warming. But it's described as critically insufficient, according to Climate Action Tracker, and is one of only 6 countries not to have ratified the deal. Earlier, I spoke to Umit Shahin, a senior scholar and the coordinator of climate change studies at Istanbul Policy Centre.
Everything Turkey is doing to combat climate change is about national policies. But unfortunately, Turkey is not one of the countries to accept net zero target yet, 2050 net zero target. And Turkey does not have any absolute emissions reduction commitment.
Well, I'm pleased to say that COP26 President Alok Sharma joins me now. Mr. Sharma, good to talk to you. When you see these images in Turkey, you see an urgent need to get them on board. How will you persuade them?
Well, I've had a very good set of discussions with a range of ministers today, and there is a clear recognition here that actually climate change is an issue that affects all countries. Climate change doesn't recognize borders, and Turkey itself, of course, is a climate vulnerable country. It sits in the Mediterranean basin, which is one of the most climate vulnerable regions in the world. The discussions I've had today have centered around how Turkey can do even more.
And while we're trying to pressure other countries to do their bit, we need to get our own house in order, don't we? A report out this week says the UK is woefully unprepared, and more so than 5 years ago, for climate change.
Well, I would say we should be judged on what we have achieved. So since the year 2000, we have been the country of all the G20 nations which has decarbonised our economy the fastest. We were, of course, the first country to put into law that we would be net zero by 2050. We've also set out a 2030 emission reduction target of 68%. In terms of our emissions. And of course, we are taking concrete action. At the end of last year, the Prime Minister put out his 10-point plan for a green industrial revolution, demonstrating how we ourselves are going to be transitioning to clean energies and ensuring that we are able to meet the environmental commitments that we have made.
Mr. Sharma, I would like to refer to our data dashboard here, which shows that 50% of the power mix is still coming from fossil fuels. When you look at that, you wonder, why are we opening coal mines?
Well, if you're referring to the proposed coal mine in Cumbria, that, of course, has now gone to public inquiry. So we'll see what happens as part of that. But if you look at the energy mix of the UK, 40% of our energy was coming from our electricity power was coming from coal in 2012. We're now at below 2%. And we've said by 2024, no more coal in our electricity mix. That is real progress. And the reason, Samantha, we've been able to do that is we have grown our offshore wind sector to now be the biggest in the world, the largest offshore wind sector in the world. And we're going to quadruple that over the next 10 years.
OK, Alok Sharma, good to talk to you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, let's bring you some more of the day's climate news now. And more than a quarter of UK schools are located in areas above the World Health Organization air pollution limits. That's according to new data that's been released by the campaign group Global Action Plan. It suggests over 3.4 million children are learning in an unhealthy environment. China has launched a spacecraft carrying 3 astronauts to part of its new space station, the country's first crewed mission in 5 years. The crew will spend 3 months aboard the space station, 236 miles above the Earth. It comes after NASA criticised China for failing to take responsibility for their space debris, which impacts the environment. And an attempt to break the record for the fastest train journey between London and Glasgow. The Avanti West Coast service arrived at Glasgow Central just 21 seconds behind the current record. Despite not making a new record, the Transport Secretary Grant Shapps says the attempt highlights how trains are a clean, green way of connecting major cities in the UK. Now, I want to bring in our data dashboard for you here. Well, this shows the level of human-induced global warming since the Industrial Revolution, just over 1.2 degrees, and it's ticking up the whole time. And this is the total amount of global CO2 emissions, 2.41 trillion tonnes. And again, it's ticking up even while we look at it. Well, those rising temperatures are being blamed for severe drought, which is being felt all over the world. So what is drought? Let's have a look. Well, the UN has released a report today with a warning that drought could become the next global pandemic. Mami Mizutori is UN Special Representative of the Secretary-General for Disaster Risk Reduction and joins me now. Hello, Mami. How is drought going to look like the next pandemic?
So drought is disaster which expands across nations, regions. The spatial scale is enormous, and the time scale, it can affect countries for years, if not decades. Thirdly, the cascading impact beyond the first water stress. The first impact is across sectors, across scales. And then finally, if a drought happens in 1 or 2 of the major production areas of the 4 crops, rice, wheat, maize, and soy at the same time, it can really ignite a global food insecurity. So that's why we think that drought could be the next pandemic.
A pandemic without a vaccine, of course. Is it affecting more and more countries?
Absolutely. So our report is drawing data from IPCC, and it says that in all of Americas, from north, central to south, Australia, Africa, Southern Europe, and Central Asia, there is a high risk of severe drought because of global warming.
OK, Mami Mizutori, really good to talk to you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Now, West Africa has been greatly impacted by drought, but now there's a campaign to plant around 355,000 trees in 90 villages across Mali and Senegal. The project is being run by the International Olympic Committee to offset its climate emissions. It's called the Great Green Wall Initiative and is in conjunction with the UN and Tree Aid, which aims to restore degraded landscapes in the Sahel region in Africa. And staying in that region, the tree planting efforts don't stop there. We can take you now to Ethiopia's Matema forest.
trade works in dryland African countries where people are living just on the front line of the climate crisis areas. I can tell you about Ressa. Because of the climate change, he has lost some of the fertility of his land. The rain is not no more reliable, so some of the crops he has been growing is now not able to be grow and then able to harvest good things. The changing climate made his farming no more enough to produce for his family to feed the whole year. Poor people living in there, if they lose their security of producing and living in that area, then after 20 years, that place will not be able to support the people's living around. There were some rivers which have been flowing year-round. We need to have some support to cross those rivers because they have water flowing during even dry season. But nowadays, because of this climate crisis, those rivers and streams which are no more there.
Now, we know that one of the best ways to decarbonise our transport system right now is by switching to electric cars. In 2018, the UK produced half of all electric cars in Europe. But the expansion of gigafactories on the continent means that that could fall to just 4% by 2030. Now, is the UK racing to catch up?
Gigafactory ultimately is a factory that produces batteries, or battery cells, to be precise, at scale. It produces at least a gigawatt hour of those batteries. If you use your dishwasher, you would be using around 1 kilowatt hours of electricity. And in this case, 1 gigawatt hour is at least 1 million times that. We have seen a number of investments happening in Europe, and if they all scale up on time, in fact, by 2030, Europe will be producing 1/3 of the global battery production capacity. The factories so far announced in the UK are a very small fraction. The electric cars can be cheaper as petrol cars as soon as 2026 across Europe. To make that happen, we need to push car makers to invest in mass production of those vehicles.
Well, that is all for today. Tomorrow, Sky News is in South Sudan, where entire communities have been devastated by severe flooding. That's at the same time tomorrow here on Sky News. Hope to see you then.